Hey guys, welcome to the 4th episode of Memetaa TV. In a tutorial I'm basically calling the basics of the basics. This tutorial I'm going to go over basically the roster size, how ASB plays, so you can get a better idea of what you can expect jumping into the game, as well as the basic HUD and the meters that you should be aware of. And that'll be it. So, just to get started immediately, or no, actually, I did want to say that these upcoming tutorials, they are obviously meant for beginners, but I believe that even if you are a current player, you might still learn something in these, and there are a lot of things that I found that maybe you might not be aware of, some values you might not have quantified, and other things, and I'm not saying that'll show up in this tutorial, but in the later ones, if you are a current player and you want to check them out, I would advise you it's not a bad idea because you might learn something, and you might spot something I didn't mention. So if that's the case, you might help me out by putting something in the comments that I missed. So if you do something like that, I would be very appreciative. But getting that aside, I will talk about the roster, and as you can see from the character select screen, it is a large roster. I do have all the DLC so far, so there are some characters here that won't show up on the original screen. But it is, I believe, 32 characters without the DLC, and 41 if you include all the known DLC. And because of this, there are obvious tier differences, as is evident in very heavy roster games. And say you want to play Rohan, you are in love with Rohan's character, you are probably going to have a lot of bad matchups versus someone who wants to play Whole Horse, who, will have maybe 2 or 3, tough matchups where, I will say the Rohan player will have about 20 bad matchups just because your character suffers from a lot of, lack of tools or lack of a lot of things. But, that's that. But otherwise, just in recognition of, the roster size, there aren't really clone characters, or I wouldn't say there are any, period, and everybody does have their own little style of play. So, be aware, feel free to sample around, and, even today I've been just literally started going through, like, down the entire roster and, finding things with everybody, which I didn't really want to do, but I'm kind of doing it in preparation for the new patch, and so I can give you guys better character tutorials when I get to that point. And as a note on the DLC, I can't see into the future, so I do not know how Bandam is going to market the DLC in, Western release. I'm honestly surprised they did a Western release in general, but, I can't imagine them charging the 600 yen, or the, the $6-7 for each individual character like they tried with the Japanese release, and, even now in Japan they're doing the 300 yen deal on all the DLC, and I can imagine that default for the US release, and if they knock it down a bit more, I would hope they would, because I just think in general it'll be really hard to try and get people to buy the characters otherwise. But, there's that, and if they do decide to be stupid and, full price the DLC, my advice to you, is just do your research and, buy really who you really think you really want to play. But, 32 character roster, I'm pretty sure you're not going to suffer too much from a lack of choice. So that's basically it, as I will say about the character roster, and from there I'm just going to go into the how it plays. So from the get-go, I will say that it is, like CC2 has claimed themselves, it's a very beginner-friendly game. There are very simple mechanics, and there are some easy mechanics for, starting players that will get you a little, decent damage combos that you might not be able to execute by yourself. But even, that aside, or, even if you start learning the game and, you're using, like, say, a standard controller and you're worried that it won't take you up to the higher skill levels, I basically do everything fine on a controller. I don't feel that it's like, it subtracts, just because I'm used to arcade stick, I feel like I have some problems, but if you are used to a controller for fighting games, then I think you will get by just fine, because I can still hit the combos I hit on arcade stick with my controller, and I think it really just comes to how you want to set your buttons. But, that kind of set aside, there is a high skill ceiling, and you know, there are obvious combos you will have to practice if you want the maximum amount of damage from your meter. And I won't say that they are too complicated. You know, hard combos in this game are still pretty darn easy combos in other fighting games, but they will take some practice, and you know, getting them down so you can get them perfectly is, and you will want to have them down pretty perfect so you always get the max damage on combos, is pretty important. But I wouldn't say it's a huge time investment, and I think you can pick them up pretty fast. And you know, even with that huge skill ceiling, if you aren't able to use those huge combos, you know, you never learn any of them. If you learn how to use the game mechanics to your advantage, and you know how to use the system better than maybe somebody who can do those huge combos, then you will probably win over them as long as you get the damage you can take. So, you know, don't be too worried about learning huge damage combos from the get-go, and just focus on learning how to exploit the system, and, you know, how to work your opponents and work them into your gameplay style. Alright, and from there on, I will, you know, immediately say from the get-go, this is not a fast game, and if you are into very fast-paced games, I can immediately tell you that you will not enjoy any second of this game, because it is very slow. It will get incredibly defensive in certain matchups, like if you are fighting Gyro, and they are a defensive Gyro player, you will suffer, because it will be very slow. You'll be chipping away at guard gauge and chipping away at health, and you know, you'll feel like you are fighting a uphill battle the entire time. So if you do not like that sort of thing, you know, I really can't recommend the game at all. And you know, I will say, you know, there is plenty of rushdown, and you know, a lot of people get by with really aggressive rushdown, but even if they're doing that, they are playing very smart, and you will have to time, you know, or not time, but you'll have to, you know, I guess, yeah, time when you charge in, how you charge in, and what strings you use to make sure you get the max amount of, you know, safety, and you don't have to worry too much about your opponent punishing you for it. So even if you are very heavy attacker, make sure you keep your brain about you and you just don't mindlessly charge in, because that will get you taken down very fast. And, you know, from a viewer standpoint, you might notice there are a lot of times in matches where you're seeing, you know, like things like this, where there's like a lot of nothing happening. There's a lot of backsteps, random running forward, backstep, jumping, empty jumps, you know, all of the sorts of movements that seems like it's really pointless, and there's absolutely like no, you know, jabs thrown. This, you know, from a viewpoint, it's very boring, but just remember that this is how the game, when it gets defensive, it looks like this, because it's often that someone is fishing for their opponent to do something, or they're, you know, like trying to get to a perfect range and a perfect positioning that they can, you know, get the right hit and the right offensive on their opponent. So, you know, I'm sorry to say it's not always fun to watch, but from a playing standpoint, you know, I like it. You know, all that movement, it doesn't seem like there's a lot going on, but if it's a very tight match, then chances are the players who are actually in the match are working their brains pretty hard to figure out what they're going to do next. And it is a 99-second timer, and you know, if it goes down to final round, it'll probably be like almost a 5-minute match, because those will be like 99 very real seconds, especially if it goes to time up. And you know, like I said, it's not exciting maybe for viewers, but for the players, it's pretty fun, because those 99 seconds will be very taxing and it's very tiring. But, you know, it's a lot of thinking, a lot of, you know, timing, and a lot of, you know, just spacing with your opponent. So, that's what I will say there. And I just will throw out, like, a few fundamental pointers that, you know, I think you should be aware of from the get-go. If you've watched any match videos, you might notice a lot of crouching lights. You know, these are thrown out a lot. And that's generally because, you know, these are the only attacks in the game that can really be spammed and be relatively safe. Because of this, you know, they're also pretty obvious when they're coming, because say an opponent jumps at you, and even if you block this, if you decide, you know, not to punish it for, you know, or you can't punish it, you can expect, you know, a crouching light to come. If more so than anything, you know, look for the crouching light, because it's so fast, they'll want to try and hit you there first, because, you know, they know you block high, because, you know, you block the jump in, so they're going to want to hit you low. So just be always aware that before anything, always look for the light. Even if it's fast, just know to go immediately to your crouching guard. And, you know, just be wary that if they are actually tricky and smart, they might try to go for an overhead. you know, whatever their overhead might be, and that's when you react to that. React to that, but don't try and react to the light, because there's no way you can. There's no way you're going to react to that. So, you know, react or guard the light first, and then try and react to the mids or the overheads. And, you know, if you don't want to try and do that, then remember that jumps are really great in this game. You know, they'll obviously most likely get you out of that light. If not, you'll get tagged maybe a little bit. And then, you know, that'll put you at maybe 0 and you'll be in the air and your opponent will be on the ground, in which case you'll still be at a pretty good advantage because jump attacks are really great. Why are they great? If, you know, obviously like in any game like that, if you have a really well-timed jump attack, even if the opponent like stylish moves it or guards it, they can't really punish it just because of the recovery won't be long enough. Or you'll basically meet at 0. Or just in general, trying to punish these are, you know, just really high risk because a lot of characters don't have really great anti-air. So even if they try to do it, they're running more risk of a counter hit by trying to get you out of the air than they are by just blocking and letting you, you know, do the attack and getting in. So be wary that, you know, be aware of what characters have the good anti-airs and look out for them. But if you're fighting an opponent that, you know, really doesn't have any, don't be afraid to do huge jump-ins, because, you know, if the opponent is smart, they won't try and blindly punish it, because they'll know that their character just can't do anything about it. And, you know, from that standpoint also, you know, just to use these as a movement tool to get away, like say an opponent's trying to do an unblockable setup and you don't have the guard gauge to get a stylish move out of it, then you can easily try, you know, a back jump, because it might still tag you, but chances are it'll tag you in the air, even if you can't guard it, because there is no aerial guard. Chances are it'll just, you know, barely tag you. It might knock you back to the ground, or, you know, you might get hit in the way back, and it'll cause a little bit of damage. But it's a lot less risk than sitting there and trying to block it yourself. So, you know, always remember, if you really don't want to deal with something and you have the health to spare, then, you know, jumping's not always a bad idea. And there is a rare occasion you might actually get some invincibility out of it, and you can, if you're, you know, did like a neutral jump like this, you can try and throw out a jumping attack on your way down and fish for a counter hit. Oh yeah, and, you know, my last kind of pointer outside of that is, you know, just know the range on your attacks. Like, say you're a Jonathan player, remember your crouching lights and your standing lights don't have great range, but, you know, your mids and, like, your heavies get decent range. But say, like, you know, you hit with this, there is always a chance, actually, Jonathan, yeah, will often, like, you can't go to a crouching low from his jump because it just doesn't have the range. So make sure you watch out and know that you have to go, like that, you know, to make sure you actually connect properly, because it'll hurt you a lot more if you whiff this and then accidentally throw out the medium after, and then your opponent blocks it and he punishes you for it. So be very aware of your ranges, so not only that you can, you know, not whiff attacks, but you can get the max amount of damage, because say you hit from a really far range, manage to, like, you know, poke your opponent with this, and you can react to it and do that, or even just that and get the hard knockdown. That's a lot better for you than, say, you just threw out this medium and you did like 25 damage and that's it. That's a lot better than, you know, just knowing, like, being ready, and just at every range just know what things can keep you safe and what will put you at danger. And, you know, it won't kill you to do something a little risky every so often. Just be aware of what's actually risky and what's actually safe. And, you know, that'll really, once you figure that kind of stuff out with your character, you can basically from there on out choose if you want to play very offensive or defensive, because, you know, once you know that stuff, then just be defensive, you know, guard your opponent's attacks, and then you know exactly what you need to punish with at the right times, at the right distances. If you're offensive, that means you know exactly what attacks to use to get in, what attacks to use to whittle down guard gauge, and, you know, even the most defensive player, like a gyro player, will have to, you know, crumple eventually, either because they're afraid of their guard getting broken, or, you know, just in general, you're at a life lead, and they can't do anything else but attack you, in which case, you know, you're at advantage. And, you know, that's about it, as I can say about basic gameplay-wise. And then from there, I will just go into the gauges to cover the last part of the tutorial up. Your health gauge is the largest green bar at the top, as you could imagine. It's kind of self-explanatory. It's, you know, like I said, because it's kind of, you have pretty healthy characters, matches do last a long time. It's about 1,000 for the standard character, or 1,000 is considered the standard amount of health. The lowest, I believe, is 700, and that is for Iggy only. So be aware that certain characters do have lower health, but in exchange for that, they do have some better, abilities otherwise. Or other things that cover up for their health deficiency. And also know chip damage does exist in this game, like say you get hit by a special attack, like that, or that will do chip damage, obviously it'll cause varying amounts depending on the special move, but it's only special moves. Command moves like say Jonathan's Zoom Punch, this does not cause any chip damage, so the only thing you should look out for are, technically, most projectiles will always cause chip damage and the like. But otherwise, chip damage can actually not kill you. Like if you're on your last pixel of health, if you block a special move even, like that will not kill you. It will not take away your last pixel, so you can actually fight down to your very last pixel and you can make your opponent work to, take out that last pixel. So, just always be ready to come back, never give up. And just, know that that health advantage does mean a lot to you if you do have it, because once you're at health advantage, then your opponent is forced to come into you, and if your opponent is someone who really likes defensive play, or is a horseback character, you're at a huge advantage when you have health advantage versus them being at health advantage, in which case they can sit on their horse and wait for you to do something stupid. Oh great, so next thing we'll talk about is guard gauge, which is that small green bar you see below your health. Basically anytime you guard an attack, any attack you guard, like anything special, command moves, whatever, will cause guard damage. And if you get your guard gauge taken all the way down, you get guard broken, and it looks like that. And obviously, as you can see, guard break gives you a huge window. You obviously can't do anything during that, and it gives your opponent, if they time it smartly, a full punish on you. And other than that, remember stylish moves, which are your just guard, the just mode mechanic, which I'll talk about in a different tutorial. Do use about 25%, I believe, guard gauge. So those will use guard gauge. Dio's burst does use some guard gauge as well. So there's that. Remember that it's not just something you use from guarding, it's something that you do use for system mechanics. And the recovery time on it is fairly slow, and if, say, you are jumping, if you're getting hit by a throw, or if you're getting hit by any, like, supers, so like a 1-gauge super, like that, like during those periods, your guard gauge actually does not recover, so if you're jumping a lot, remember your guard gauge isn't increasing at all. And so it only basically increases if you're standing, if you're doing damage to your opponent in a combo on the ground, and it will increase if your opponent is hitting you, but at that time it will be recovering at half the amount, so be careful. And outside of that, guard gauge is something you have to watch both your own, because like I said, you need it to stylish move, so if you are actually, let's see here, like down to this amount, if your opponent sees this, then they know, okay, he can't stylish move, so it is my chance to go in, and I can do unblockable setups, I can do full Russians, and you can't stylish out of it. So, knowing that, you have to pay attention and be ready to run away at times like those, or just be ready to block, or, do something about it, because if you don't do anything about it, your opponent's going to guard break you, or just get a free unblockable on you. And as for, your opponent, then it just works double for you in the same way that okay, this is the time I can rush in, this is the time I can do the unblockable setups and they won't be able to get out of them, or these are the times I can, threaten them with a lot of different things that they won't be ready for. Or, if you're really smart, you'll be able to time say your opponent's not actually watching their guard gauge, you can actually time the guard break perfectly so you get the max amount of damage out of it. And say you guard break with something like this, like in the middle of that, you might only get the last 3 hits of it and then it knocks your opponent away. Then say you guard broke with something like that, then you get, like a full punish after it. And that covers that. So last, I'll just talk about the final meter that every character has, and that's your heart heat gauge, which is that little thing you see flashing at the very bottom that says max. It functions like any standard super bar in fighting games. You start the round, or every match, in round 1 with 1 bar, so basically both sides will start with 1 bar. And you can stack up to 3. Just remember that after the first round, that starting bar, you will carry around between the next rounds. Say you use all your three of your meters at the end of the first round, and the second round you will start with none. So be careful. And as far as that, just remember your uses for your meter is your heart heat attack, which is the 1 gauge in this game. There is the great heat attack, which is 2 gauges. And then, of course, everybody has the Poutine cancel or the universal cancel, which I usually refer to it as in my tutorials. And this can be used for offense and defense. So, yeah, I'll talk about it in a different tutorial, like the combo tutorial. And meter really does dictate how you play a lot. And there are, you know, I'll basically talk about 2 theories on how to use meter. Now, you know, I talk to a lot of Japanese players, and, you know, I've got to sit down and watch a lot of matches and, you know, talk with a lot of people seriously about how they decide to use meter. And there's basically 2 different schools. There are people that say you're Jonathan and you get a hit. Like you get a hit there and you confirm it, they will tell you, okay, once you get that hit, do everything you can to use all your meter and get the max amount of damage out of that, you know, chance. And don't waste that opportunity to get that max damage. Now, you know, obviously this is a really offensive way to approach it, and it's not necessarily a bad idea, but there is another school that will tell you, okay, say you got this hit, but it's at the beginning of the match. Very beginning of the match, they might tell you, alright, do a combo that uses, you know, like 1 meter if you have 2, if you have 3 meters, use 2, or if you have like only 1 meter, you know, don't use any at all. They'll tell you things like that. And that's basically because they're telling you to save that 1 meter, so you always have 1 meter to cancel with, defensively. And, you know, what is this kind of way of thinking? This is either, so say if you're doing it in the middle of a string and you do something that's unsafe like that, and your opponent blocks it, then you can, oops, okay, let's retry here. Alright, so say you do something like this, and that gets blocked, then you can cancel it like that, and you're safe, and you don't have to worry about it. Or say, you know, like, your opponent, like say your opponent stylishes that move and you're afraid they're going to punish you. Like even if you just throw out a low jab, or like a jab like this, then remember you can cancel it and then you're completely at 0 frames and you're safe. So there's, you know, these 2 ways of thought. And, you know, I can't really say which one is right and which one is wrong. You know, I do practition the latter idea of playing a bit more defensively, because that's kind of what I enjoy. But, you know, I've seen a lot of matches won by both ideas, or both schools of thought. And, you know, I might have actually seen more won by, you know, the players that spend all their meter, more so than the defensive players. But I won't say, you know, who's right and who's wrong. But I will tell you that these 2 do exist, you know. Whatever you decide to do is totally up to you, and generally which one you use is maybe even depending on what kind of character you play. So just remember that. And it's more important over that to be just wary of your opponent's way of using meter and their kind of own lifestyle, and just always be aware of both you and your opponent's meter, because, you know, if your opponent is the type that, like I said, you know, like this kind of happens and they have a meter. Oops. What was I? How did I do this before? Oh, I remember. Okay, so say, you know, you were the gyro player and you weren't aware that your opponent had that meter to cancel and you tried to go for a full punish. There's a huge chance that, you know, they cancel, they block your assault, you tried to go for that full punish, and then they're going to, you know, block it and punish you right back. And if you don't have the meter to cancel your own string, then you're going to eat a full punish. So, you know, there's that kind of situation where it just turns into a huge gamble of, you know, is your opponent going to cancel? Are they not going to cancel? Are they type of person who doesn't? and, you know, all that kinds of things. So, you know, you have to pay attention to how your opponent plays, and, you know, if they have that meter, just be wary that, you know, be expecting a cancel sometimes, because it'll always, you know, come out of nowhere, or it'll always come when you least expect it. So just be, you know, wary to play a bit more defensively if that case rears its ugly head. And that's about all it is for Heart Heat Gauge. And, you know, just outside of that, in the basic tutorial I guess I want to cover here is just remember that you do have some character-specific meters, like Gyro here has that meter that you see charging there. I won't talk any specifics, but they will always appear above your Heart Heat Gauge, so if there's any additional information you need to see about your character, just remember to look there. And, you know, that about covers it. You know, I just kind of really wanted to give you an honest idea of someone who's, you know, played the game a lot since release, and who's been playing in the current patch a lot, and, you know, post-patches. The gameplay hasn't really changed in this sense, and I don't think even past the character balancing patch, and, you know, when it eventually hits the US stores, or not even US, but Western stores, you know, Europe, wherever else it comes out, you can expect this kind of gameplay. If it's completely different game, I really doubt it, but I feel like this will essentially what they feel is going to become the final build. So, you know, just be wary of it. And I don't think anything will ever change about the speed. I don't think they can ever reduce health or, you know, change enough battle mechanics that the game will become something completely different from this. So, you know, that's my piece. It turned out a bit longer than I thought it would, but, you know, I did want to get out all the truth I could, just so I wasn't deceiving anybody and telling you, oh hey, this is a really fast-paced game like Guilty Gear, and, you know, you can go crazy with it, because it's probably far from the case. So that's it. As always, remember to rate, comment, subscribe, and from here on out, I guess I will go a bit more in-depth into system mechanics. I will not just, you know, talk on basic stuff, but I will tell you specifics, and, you know, we'll work our way from very simple stuff to a lot more complicated ideas. And I believe the next tutorial I'll probably do is basically around movement and sidestep, so be on the lookout for that. And until then, thanks for watching, guys.